Conversation is.
Hello and welcome to Faith and Honest Conversation. I'm Thomas Rowland and this is James Farrant.
Hello.
And we met when we were training as counsellors. And are here really just to be as honest as we can about our own experience of faith, and make it okay for you to have your own experience. So, James, we said we'd just see what happens with this one. We've not planned anything.
Absolutely.
We're going to be, but I have just remembered the really thing that I really was struck with last time, with that immediacy between us. And
Yes.
kind of experiencing God in the immediacy.
Yeah. Great. Well, let's use that as a bit of a springboard. Do you want to, go from there? Have you got anything to go with from it?
Yeah, I think where I just took it from was, it's okay for us to not have a plan. Almost.
Yes.
The task for me at the moment is to tune into what's going on between us.
Yeah, being present and sort of like engaged with one another rather than have a particular format or conversation that we want to have or plot points that we want to hit, I suppose.
Yeah. And I think that's, it's you can get caught up, can't you? In maybe I should own it. I get caught up in, I've got to be informative, or I've got to say, I've got to cover this area or that area of, and I think that what this has always been about, when it's been most powerful for me, is us being authentic with each other as much as we feel able in the moment. And I think that's when it's, that's when it's most impacting for me. I don't know about other people, but I kind of trust that other people will find that,
hopefully feel that sort of
impactful.
the impact that it's having on us, like that they'll be able to engage with that to some extent. That's my hope as well. When I remember that last week as well, when you mentioned that about being immediate, like the present and experiencing the now, the here and now with it, and I was just like, oh wow. I occasionally get that when we're chatting, or quite, I'd say occasionally, quite frequently get that sort of like real sense of we're here, we're engaged with it, I'm really engaged with it, and it makes me feel different. I feel like a sense of, I don't know, it's quite intimidating, isn't it? Feels quite fearful. And I think I was re-listening to a bit of what we spoke about last week, and there was a moment where, and I reflected on this afterwards actually, where I reassured you or said something like, "Oh no, it's fine. Whereas actually, what I was doing was hiding my own fear with it and just going, "Oh no, I am." It's quite, because I think you'd said, "Oh, it's quite scary," and I was like, "No, it's going to be okay," or something. Because like my natural instinct is to placate and to make things all right rather than engage with the present, or like confront fear or confront like that reality, the immediate reality. And reflecting on it was quite scary, I suppose. It was quite revealing to me that actually being present is quite an intimidating thing to do, isn't it? There's quite a lot of expectation, I think, that I feel on myself.
Yeah, I think there is. I think I kind of want to weave my way between, like, the standpoint of this is what you should be doing, so it becomes a sort of expectation, and I think a lot of helpful stuff can be done outside of that immediate present moment, so that it doesn't become, so that it doesn't become quite so intimidating. Like in itself, it doesn't feel like it should be intimidating,
No.
And yeah, like that. There's a spontaneity, I guess, about it, about what I'm kind of conceptualizing in what I've experienced before. Like it happens almost. And I think that's an important point, that, you know, like, I remember writing about this in an essay about spirituality, was that, and it comes up again in kind of ideas around kind of spiritual disciplines or religious disciplines, that there's a like, you can't make it happen. Or that God is quite unexpected, or can't be controlled or contrived, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it's kind of making the conditions in which God might arrive. and God can arrive any way he wants to.
Yeah.
But kind of, and I think that's what's meant by certainly sort of maybe Buddhist sort of disciplines, or maybe kind of disciplines that might happen in a monastery or something. Is like prayer, and other things are where we might meet God. But at the end of the day, it's a grace, maybe is a evangelical term.
Yeah, that God isn't it's not like we're not conjuring God up. We're not.
Yeah.
It's sort of putting ourselves in a position where we're able to perceive and sense God. So it doesn't come from a place of striving or a place of forcing it, as you mentioned, but by us just being in a still place, or a receptive place to experience or see or sense, I suppose, something like that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I'd be careful that it's, you know, it's me experiencing what's going on in me as much as well, yeah, and that experience is in response to trying to open myself up to you. Like, and the phrase that came to me is catching God at it.
I like that.
Sort of like God's already there, in a sense, and it's that, that's what he's doing, or that's the movement at this point. And then there's a sense of, you know, I can do all that and maybe nothing will happen. You know, maybe God isn't there, or maybe I don't. Yeah.
I think that something else you just said as well, the catching God at it, I don't know, that just really hit me, and just kind of, it helps take away a bit of the fear, because if God's there already, and if it's God who we're meeting, what is there to be afraid of? The phrase so frequent in the Bible is "Don't be afraid," and "I'm here, don't be afraid," and so on. And we don't need to be afraid of like meeting other people, meeting ourselves, or meeting God, because he's there already. Like, and I say he loosely always. God's there already and working between us and amongst us and in us and around us. And I think that's really securing. It gives a real sense of security, because you know that you're being held, and that the other person's being held, and that there's no harm that can come to you in that space, even though it feels unnerving and oh wow, you're kind of on the precipice of one another, on the precipice of this, like, of the endlessness that is humanity, as well as a sense of divinity, the sense of divinity within humanity, I suppose. Oh, that's getting a bit weird, isn't it?
No, I loved it.
Weird language straight away.
But I think this is, I think that's really beautiful, because it's trying to capture an experience in language, isn't it?
It just sounds really, really, really pretentious, or like airy fairy.
I mean, I love it, but then, you know,
I'm glad you do, because actually, like, when I was saying, I was like, yeah. And then I heard it, and I was like, ah, no, maybe not. That felt a little bit weird.
What I really loved was the phrase, like standing on the precipice of each other, or is that what you said?
Yeah, standing on the precipice. Sense that, like, that humanity or spirit, I suppose, is what I'm trying to get at, is endless or boundless in some way, and that, we were talking about last week about that connection and that real connection, and that whenever we're disconnected, that's the sin, and we spend our lives, and we even joked about it at the end, that right, back to going and being disconnected again.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go off and sin.
Which is why, like, these phrases are so loaded, aren't they? So it's much better to talk of it in connection and disconnection, because then it takes a lot of the barb out of it, and it takes a lot of like the expectation and the pressure off. That's like me going off on a random aside, which is very common. But the whole, standing on the precipice of one another, getting a sense that the spirit of the other is as endless as your own spirit is, this sense of vastness, and it's perfectly okay, it's perfectly natural for that to be that way, particularly if our spirit is a part of God, or if we are connected to God in some way. And I suppose this is where I'm at with faith a little bit, is that I see God is, and this is like I realise now I'm not the only person who believes this. This is like a pantheistic or a universalist approach to spirituality, which heresy or whatever you want to call it, or different alternative. Is where I'm at anyway. And the whole.
I love that. I love that, James. And I also love, for me, that's such a difference from where I was historically. Like, that I can say this is where I'm at. It might be heretical.
Yeah,
I don't care. This is where I'm at. I'm going to stand in this at the moment.
I'm happy with it. I accept me. And God, I know God accepts me. We'll see if anybody else does. Right?
Yeah.
Sorry, do go on. That's right. I keep distracting myself anyway. That God's just
as bad as each other
through us all and through everything. And so whenever you feel that connection, what you're experiencing is God in others, or God somewhere. So it might be God in you, because it's you experiencing that sense of spirit or sense of like vastness within yourself, which as a human body, we're finite, and we're quite good with finites as a species. I think we understand limits, so that when we do gaze up into the vastness of space and just see black and the occasional star, and you really feel tiny, it's because you're kind of seeing a bit, like you're getting a tiny glimpse of infinity, which we're not really used to. Although, and I say used to, not because like we can experience that, we can experience that infinity within, and that within it. All of just malfunctioned. Give me a second, I'll reset. And that infinity in others as well. So there's it's cool. Anyway, that was a very long-winded way of saying I like it.
Yeah, and I mean I'm losing track of where we come from, but I'm riding on it. And like, there was something that you said that I thought was so cool, which, and I can't remember exactly your words, but it's like when we realize the spirit of somebody else, and the image that I got was like that, realizing that, I kind of, it's like there's a spirit in me. I call it the spirit of God, or being human, or something, or whatever it is, or a mixture of everything. And there's the spirit of the other, and it's like we can hear an echo of where those two spirits sort of merge together.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that was it. Like that, like it's like oh, and we're one at some point.
There's like a resonance, isn't there? Like
Yeah.
like a tuning fork thing, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, hang on, there's like there's a connection
Yeah.
without us actually touching. There's a connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that's going on in my head is around intimacy. And when you were talking about the fear at the beginning,
yes,
that's what kind of came into me, is kind of like how much we fear actually being intimate.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
And you know, sometimes there's good reason for that. Like the other person is just not safe. And it might be, you know, in our conversation, at some points I'm just not safe to talk to. You know, I'm off sinning. I'm off standing in sin, and I'm pretending I'm here, but I'm standing in sin. No, but well, but kind of yes as well. Like that, you know, like we can perceive a blocking off from connection from the other person.
And to sort of build on that, I think what can happen is that sometimes one person might be really open and really like receptive, or like willing to be intimate and vulnerable, and the other might be not in a place where they're aware of that. You know, we're easily distracted. We've kind of got one directional perception and vision and all this sort of thing. So if we're not looking inwards, we're looking elsewhere, then we miss that, and as a result, we the first person can really come up against a block or a barrier, or feel really misunderstood, rebuffed, whatever it is, and that can, I suppose, hurt or feel painful, and so naturally we build up protection around ourselves. And I think that probably happens from quite a young age. Of like, you know, you're not felt understood, or you're not felt seen, maybe that's what it is, or perceived.
I think at a really young age, like at least, you know, the first 6 months, you don't have any sort of mechanisms for stopping yourself expressing who you are.
No,
you know,
exactly.
it is just all there.
It's very much hanging out.
And you very quickly learn how the world responds to that, how key people or how others respond, and is that, and how to manage that.
And I suppose it's partly as well the sort of that stage of development where the child realizes that they're separate, that they're not an extension of their mother or primary caregiver. I don't know if that's sort of a similar time when that happens, because I don't really remember that far back in my life.
No.
I don't know many people who do.
Yeah.
There we go. You were going to say something, sorry.
Yeah, no, I like that. It's kind of I'm holding that, actually. I want to hold that because it's not quite formed, maybe, but it feels significant as that sort of age. What's going on then? And how the little person works out what being separate means. And that they can still be connected. Like separation, because there is a sense in which we are separate, like our bodies separate us. You know, that's,
I was thinking that exact thought. I was just thinking, kind of like the whole of life is all about separating, isn't it? And like, you're a child, you're very much attached before you're born, and then when you are born, you're slightly less attached, but you're still quite attached. And as you grow older, the older and older you get, the more and more detached you get from, particularly from
and
parents.
that's maturity. In a sense, isn't it? And it's also death makes it so. Like, you know, I'm the only one that's going to die my death. So it's that separates me from other people. I feel like that's not a finished. I don't think we've quite
No. I think
Completed the circle on that.
there's
But
lots and lots more thought going
yeah,
on over
what was
there.
what was going on in my head? What I felt, well, I kind of felt earlier was that maybe in our personal histories, I think it's true for me, is I'm very I'm very aware, or kind of on the lookout for how other people are and if they can receive me. Like, and maybe it's true for a lot of counselors that we had to for some reason we learned to develop empathy to a high degree so that we wouldn't be hurt in this way. In this area of intimacy, which is ironic because, you know, counseling is often about relationships, and we kind of think, and actually it's probably full of people who struggle with intimacy.
Well, I have all of these very, very clever tricks about how to avoid it.
Yeah, indeed.
We've learned the best.
I think training as a counsellor must be the pinnacle of
the pinnacle of avoiding intimacy. Yeah. Surely not. There must be. I think when I was when I first did the course previous to the one we were on was like a year-long sort of entry level sort of I think it was like you end up with a counselling certificate which you can't counsel on but allows you entry into sort of other counselling courses. And the lady who headed that up was sort of all about immediacy. That was her like buzzword that she would use all the time. She was very much somebody who would say something in the lessons or the classes that we were in, and then she would go, I wonder what's behind that. I noticed when you said that you sounded a little bit, it sounded like you were a little bit sad when you said that. Can you would you mind sharing that? Or and this sort of like real straight away getting in on whatever, honing in on whatever emotion was there right away, as that, and that being like I suppose like a bit of a line straight into what's going on right at the core of somebody, you know, that you follow the emotion every time.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, good advice for a counsellor. If anybody's listening who's training to be a counsellor, there you go. That's my first lesson. Probably the only one you'll learn from me. You're welcome. Completely free. But basically, it sort of, it made conversation with her like incredible, but also quite challenging, because like she would pick up on stuff and you'd be like, oh, I didn't even realize that I did that, or I'd said that, or I didn't even realize I said that apologetically, but I totally did say that apologetic, or what, you know, whatever it was. And there is like this real thing about the immediacy that leads to intimacy. And I can see why there's like there seems to be a bit of a link there. And I can see why that's quite intimidating as well. Not just to get all of the I words in at the same time.
Intimidating, immediate intimacy.
Exactly. All of the literature.
And I think along the same lines, it's not always intimacy with somebody else that I fear, but intimacy with myself.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, what's actually, you know, what are the real longings or fears that I have at this moment, or struggles at this moment. And I'm struck in that. I'm struck by, and that's where God is.
Yeah.
You know, that's, I think, what we've been sort of circulating as we do. But like, that's, you know, if God is going to be found anywhere, it's in that immediacy of my being, in response to the other being, whoever that might be. And like, and intimacy is the way because I guess for me, in my head, intimacy with God is the longing of God.
Yeah.
And God presumably meets us where we are, or is there where we are. Yeah, we've spoken around all these themes, I think, before.
Yeah, basically, like God is there in that, like, the depths of our spirit and in with our spirit, and is where, when we stop to reconnect with our own self, God's there already. Yeah, that's sort of where you were going with that. Is that
Yeah,
right?
I think so. I think so. But there is something else, and I'm being plagued in my head by what I was reading by Young just now.
Yeah, go on, sure.
Who was talking? I say plagued. It's just going on at the background. To this day, God is the name by which I designate all things which cross my willful path violently and recklessly, all things which upset my subjective views, plans, and intentions, and change the course of my life for better or worse. I mean, there's a lot in there, and I'm not quite sure I've quite grappled with everything. But it's in that, at the end of this quote that I'm reading, is all modern people feel alone in the world of the psyche because they assume that there is nothing there that they have not made up, that nothing would be done if we did not do it. Then one is all alone in one's psyche, exactly like the creator before creation. But through a certain training, something suddenly happens which one has not created, something objective, and then one is no longer alone. This experience of the objective fact is all important because it denotes the presence of something which is not I, yet still such an experience can reach a climax when it comes to an experience of God. Like, that's dense, and I've just said that really quickly. Right. But I think what he's saying is, you know, we can. We've talked about intimacy with ourselves and God being in us, and there's a sense of God being in something that's other than what's other, that can be quite different to where we're at or where we think we're at, maybe. And maybe this is where the other person in the relationship is quite key, that it's like God is where I am and he's where you are, and that and the reality of you might be quite jarring to my own experience and shake me up a little bit, and God being in that as well. Okay, is that making sense, James?
I think so. I think I'm following. I think there's my brain's sort of like latched onto all sorts of different things, and I'm like, come on, stay focused, stay immediate.
Yeah,
stay
no,
present.
yeah.
And I'm like, oh no, I'm losing it.
And maybe this is a quote we need to wait for next time, almost, to come back to.
I think I grasp it. So he's sort of saying that God is in the moments that really challenge him and really make him question and really make him, like, sort of shift his path. Is that? No, I think I've probably lost it, actually.
Yeah, I think I mean, everything now is going to be my interpretation. So,
yeah,
but I think where I'm taking it is, we can in things come into our lives that are maybe problems or crises, and they're that because they are different to what we want or expect, or to what's going on in us, or what we think is going on in us.
sort of like knock us off our track.
Yeah.
They give us a different sort of like feedback from what we're expecting, or different.
Yeah.
Our expectations are one like, yeah, this is the way the world is. Oh, suddenly it's very different, or suddenly this person is very different from what we expect.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. And that God is somehow in that as well.
Mm.
And I think that takes us, sorry, go on.
No, carry on. Yeah.
I think that seems key at this point, because if we just emphasize God is in us, we can, maybe we lose touch of that otherness of God.
Yes, and I was going to say exactly that. It sort of highlights the sense of God being bigger, greater, more vast, and broader than our own experience. And so, if I sense God in, say, a conservative politician, to name something that I would find anathema, then it jars my experience, and it makes me go assess and reformulate my concept and my understanding of the world. Likewise, if you start sort of seeing or experiencing God in areas where you really don't expect to see God or experience God, knowing that God lives in all of us, does change things.
And I think there's something that it kind of comes back to us, in the sense of the otherness of what we didn't expect can kind of shake us up a bit to to becoming a bit more intimate with what's really going on with ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, we realize, oh, it wasn't about X, Y, or Z. It's really about this. Or it shakes us up and realize something about our nature, like being vulnerable to reality, and you know, or being mortal, or being like it. It can take us out of dreams almost.
Say that again. So
take us out of the very normal ways we live our lives, that is in a sort of dream world where we're not actually facing, you know.
So it kind of makes our experience a little bit more real. It shaves away some of the sort of fantasy that we might be living in or have created to explain some of the unknowns and some of the stuff.
And I think when we phrase, you know, encountering God or whatever in terms of intimacy, it sounds all lovely. You know, we have that. I guess I go to kind of a romantic sort of place. And actually, you know, real intimacy means seeing people how they are, and seeing myself how I am, and seeing the real pain people might go through, and the stark realities of how it is.
And I suppose that there's quite a lot of that. I guess that's again where the sort of fear factor kicks in, or the intimidation of intimacy sort of crops up, because sometimes you think, well, maybe I don't want to see that. Maybe the fantasy is better than the reality. And to an extent that is true, but it's much better to live in the real world than it is to live in a fantasy land. And however great, however wonderful the fantasy is, it isn't real. So you can't grow in a fantasy land. You can only, there's no, you know, any growth that happens there is irrelevant, essentially, because it's not real. You might, I mean, I say that there probably are things that you'll grow and you'll develop in without realizing, but but actually for it to bed in has to be in reality.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when I'm taken with that image of our spirits merging at some point in the dark, distant echo,
Yes.
and actually maybe we merge in those parts of us that we don't want to accept or embrace. Like, if we merge in our suffering, or we merge in those places where those things we're really fearful of. And I think that's true. I'm quite aware we've been quite conceptual, or I've been quite conceptual, but like I remember recently an experience with another person, sharing about basically a bad what do you call it, prognosis, or so basically their own death is emerging into the fore of their consciousness.
Got you. Yeah.
Or is hammering on the door, at least. Yeah. And I felt so connected with him at that moment. But that's because I can't escape my death either. You know, like
it's a reality
at that level, our spirits merge.
That's a great point. Yeah. In that real suffering, in true pain, in the reality of the pain is where you connect.
Yeah. And it's not just pain. I think, you know, like it's also possibility and what you're going to do with our lives, and responsible freedom or responsibility for that, or things like that. Like it's but like it's that stuff that we never talk about and that we live our lives
again
avoiding.
It's staring into a vastness, into an unknown, isn't it?
It is.
It's sort of like, oh, that's quite scary to do that, because it's unknown. It's not necessarily bad. It's just a lot of it, particularly in the Western world. And well, I guess say in the Western world, I think throughout all societies, to a lesser or greater extent, death isn't nobody's running towards death with open arms, are they? There is a sense of, as humans, we want to preserve our own lives, we want to extend our lives, or live as fully as we possibly can here and now in this reality. And yet we don't even know what happens when we die. Nobody does. Obviously there are people who've had near-death experiences and all this sort of stuff. Still don't know. Yeah.
And completely out of control of it.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not completely, in the sense that we might be able to affect when we die, or have some control about.
Limited. Yeah, extremely limited.
You know, how we die, when we die, and especially what happens after. That's all out of control.
Very, very out of our control. Yeah.
James, I've loved this.
It's big, right? It's been a really good episode.
I don't know. I'm gonna ask what might stick for you, but I'm really gonna, that image of, well, that phrase, standing at the precipice of each other.
Yeah.
And that image of spirits merging in the darkness that we hear an echo of, that, like, those two things have really struck me.
A deeply quotable episode. It's been good. It's been good.
Where are you?
I think just the thought of when we're doing this, just that, taking that moment just to reconnect with ourselves for a moment, and knowing that like, actually what we're doing is we're connecting with ourselves and with God, and then with each other, and that, like, the richness that, like, you can see from what we just talked about, that so much has come out of that, and like so many things that we could just talk on for hours and hours about. Which is why we have to do this on episode. But it's great. It's fantastic. It makes me think, okay, it is possible to live my life more and more presently, more and more in the moment, and knowing that, it makes me think of a lot of other things that we can't go into now, but people like Brother Lawrence and other mystics, where their deep, intimate knowledge that God is right there. Yeah, which we can explore next time.
Yeah. I love that. Finish. God is right there. That's a lovely place to finish, isn't it? I like that. Thank you, James.
No problem.
Thank you for listening as well. And hope you enjoy it as much as we did, or even just a little bit as much as we did.
Let us know.
Yeah. That's
Brilliant.
it. Take care.
Cheers, Tom. Bye.